With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first sample. So before we get started, I would like to show you the sample that was provided to us so you kind of know my working point. And then I will go through what the teacher was hoping to accomplish with that, and then some suggestions and solutions that we came up with. So here is the first document that was submitted. So this document was submitted to us, and they said they would like to make it available to students in Google Classroom so that they can write answers on the doc and submit it through Google Classroom. So one of the things as educators that we have to keep in mind when we're working in a virtual setting is writing on a document, we need to think about our students' input method. Currently, most of our students are working on Chromebooks. Most of our students' Chromebooks have a trackpad. So even if we have the ability to allow students to write on top of these documents, it's probably not going to be very legible writing. And there's several steps that it takes to allow the student to get to the point to where they could write on a document. So some other solutions that I came up with first, we're going to go through those. So the first solution I came up with was just put it in a Google slide. So within a Google slide presentation, you have some different options. So the first thing that I did with this document is I used our snipping tool. Clicked on new. And this is going to allow me to take a screenshot. So I'm just going to click and drag. And that has now taken a screenshot for me. I've specifically cropped just those 4 questions. And this will allow me to now save it. I can call it whatever I'd like. So we're going to call this subtraction questions. I'm going to save it somewhere that I can find it quickly. And now we're going to go back to our slides presentation. So the first thing I'd like to point out here is the student input method here. So if I click on this, I'm not moving anything. I'm not able to move anything. So the way that I did this is that I created these 3 elements. There's the big image, and then there is a rectangle shape, and those are all part of the background or part of the master slide that the students don't have access to move and edit easily. So no matter what I do here, I can't select those objects, I can't delete them, and I can't move them. What I did add, however, over here on the left side is I added 2 text boxes. And these text boxes would allow the students to write in any work. So here they could put in the answer. Let's say they thought it was 300. They can then submit this document back to you via Classroom, and you could see their answer. They could also put the work in at the top when they carried. On this one, or borrowed, I should say, it's not as easy necessarily. They'd have to say, start from the left to the right, which is traditionally not how our brain works and thinks. So that is the only caveat with doing 1 box at the top. The other option is I've inserted different text boxes down here. I've inserted 3 separate text boxes, 1 for each place value. So here, they could say, well, I can't do 5 minus 7. I'm going to need to borrow, and I'm going to turn that into 4, which is going to make that 15. And then they can work through each of those as they go. So that's the other option. And really what we're doing in this digitizing session today is I'm trying to showcase some of the different potential options that we thought about. We're going to walk through how I did this pretty quickly, just to show you how to accomplish it. And then in our next slide session, we're going to go into some more details on how to actually use the master view, which is what we're getting ready to go into. So the way I was able to put all of these things in the background is I went into what is called the master view. So the master view is what is going to change our different types of slides. So if you look closely at this, let's see if I can zoom in on that. So we know that in slides, the layout is going to allow us to pick a title slide, a title body, 2 columns, title only, etc. If you look at this slide layout called section header, you can see in the background, instead of having text boxes or placeholders, it actually has my subtraction questions. It has my rectangles in it. It is actually part of the slide itself. So if I were to insert a new slide over here and change it to section header, all of that information is already there. It's part of the slide. Now for this situation, that may not be super useful because it's the same exact questions. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at those masters. How do we control what those layouts are? So we go to the master, and over here we've got our layouts. Up here we can see which one we're editing. So we're editing the section header. So I don't want to edit that one again because that will change my first slide. So instead, I will go to the title and body. When I'm editing this master slide, it's only editing it in this slide deck. It will not edit it in all of my slide decks. So it's okay to go ahead and come in here and just delete these things. That's not going to be a big deal. And now to get that picture in here, the screenshot I took, I'm going to insert image, upload from my computer. I stored it on my desktop. Here's that image. There we go. Has my highlighter on it and everything, which is great. And now if I went out of my master layout, so all I do is go back to view, uncheck master, change my layout now to title and body. Our image is now part of the background. You cannot move it, you cannot manipulate it. So going back to my master, I'm going to go ahead and just put in some shapes. The reason I like the shapes is it kind of tells the students, hey, you're supposed to put an answer here. So all I'm going to do is copy and paste a bunch of these so I can have one for each answer. And then I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the master view. And that's it. I now have my master set up. The only thing I would need to do is create within the slide text boxes for my students. So when they click on that, they are able to just type in the answer. Without the text box, they would not be able to put in the answer. All right, so again, I went through that process fairly quickly. This is being recorded, so you can go back and watch that at a later date. We will be going into more of the detailed process within our next slides training, but I wanted to show you the process of how I created that master and not just show it to you. But now the only thing the students can manipulate and change is just that text box. Everything else is static and permanent. And really the amount of options that this can lend it to is pretty impressive. And we will get into some more examples of how we can really use this master setting to make manipulatives for our students. All right, Kathy, do we have any questions at this point?
We do not.
Okay. My next option for being able to collect student work on this, and really my go-to solution, is a Google form for collecting information from students. It's just super simple to make and really quite simple to accomplish. So here I went ahead and created a form. I'm showing you what it looks like from the student perspective, and then we'll look into it from the creation perspective. So I put the directions here. Please complete the following subtraction questions. Show your work on a piece of paper. If you miss a question, you'll be directed to submit a photo of your work shown. Please let me know if you have any questions. And then it says that it's also going to be collecting your email address. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And here we have our first question. We have an image here. I know a lot of times, a lot of teachers, math teachers specifically, are upset with the ability or inability to input math equations. Well, the perfect solution is to take a picture of it or a screenshot of it, and then you can insert it. And I'll show you how to do that again in just a moment. I've also turned on data validation for this question. So for this answer, the answer is 148. But if I go ahead and put in 200, it's going to say that's not right. Try again. And you can't move on at that point without putting in the appropriate answer. The second question is going to be a multiple choice question. And remember, I said at the beginning, if they get a question wrong, that it is going to ask them to provide their work. And as a previous math teacher, being able to see your students' work is essential. You need to know what mistakes they've made so you can help them fix their mistakes. So here we're going to say that this student said it was 362, and that's a common error here. That just means they, instead of, when they borrowed, they did not remove one from the floor and they left it alone, so they would have gotten 362 instead of the real answer, which is 262. So if I go ahead and hit next, it's going to say, please upload the work for the question that you missed. Make sure the question is clearly labeled. And then at this point in time, your students could use their Chromebook to take a photo of their work, make sure it's labeled question number 2, and they would be able to add the files. And then when they submit that file, you would be able to see their work when you review this, and you would be able to determine, hopefully, where did they go wrong and what suggestions you might have to help them fix their error. So let's go into the actual form and see what it looks like from our perspective. All right, so from the teaching perspective, the way that I have this form set up is I've got a section at the top that just has the directions in it. And then here I've got the first question. And this is an image that I've put in. So if I remove this, you'll see that we have the option here to insert an image. For time's sake, I'll just go ahead and upload my image from the previous one. And that's how you would get the image on the question. For this one, I made a short answer so they could type in their answer. And I turned on data validation, response validation, which is on the options here for that question. And you can change it to any numerous things. Number equal to 148. And then you can type in a custom error if they get it wrong. Question 2, this portion will actually have a lot more detail on it in our next Google Form training. This is actually what we call branching forms, where it will go from one section to another section based on the answer. Branching forms will only work with 2 types of questions, multiple choice and drop-down questions, which is why I made this one a multiple choice. And if you see over here to the right, we have different, based on their answer, they're going to a different location. So if they put 342, 362, or 622, all the wrong answers, it's going to push them to section 4. If they put in the correct answer, 262, they will then be allowed to submit the form. Section 4 is the section where I ask them to upload their information. Section 4 is where they would then add that file. And that's the quick version of how we would accomplish this with a Google form. Really, with this one, though, all you really need to be able to do is insert that image and allow them to type in the answer. And then you could get the same information you would get from this. All of the other stuff I showed you is kind of the bells and whistles of a Google form with the data validation and the branching forms. But if you just want to know what the response was here, all you need to do is take a screenshot of this picture, insert it, make it a short answer, and then you can collect the exact same information. All right.
I have a question.
All right. So was it Kelly's question or just all pop?
Yes. How do you create the sections in the form itself?
To create the sections, Kelly, it's over here on the right in this toolbar. This is where you create the questions themselves. This is where you can import things. You can create a title. You can upload a general image for the form, a general video, and then here's where you create the different sections at the bottom. And you can actually move the sections as well. So if you insert one and it's not where you want it, you can move it up and down. You can reorganize them and so on and so forth as you would like to. We have a pre-recorded Google Forms training that I did last week, and we talked about the basics creation of all Google Forms. So if you guys would like to check that out, you can before the next Google Form. But like I said, the next Google Form training that we're doing, which is
July 29th, 11 to 12.
July 29th, 11th through 12, we'll be going through that branching form portion in more detail. I know I'm moving through some of these things fairly quickly. Again, this is to more showcase what we can do. And then some of our future trainings are going to be diving into these functions a little bit more detail. And as always, you can always email and reach out to Kathy and myself, and we would be more than happy to help you brainstorm or walk through some of these processes. All right, so the last option, which is the exact solution that the teacher was looking for based on they want their students to be able to write on the document. We're going to be using a third-party tool called Kami, K-A-M-I. The disclaimer with Kami, though, is it is not a district-supported tool. So if you would like to use this yourself, you are welcome to use this. If you would like to use this product with your students, then you would need to get board approval for your building to use it, 1. 2, you would need to get parental consent if your students were under 13 years old. So that is the caveat to using sometimes third-party tools. So to get Kami, you go to your Google Drive. We go to New, More, and then we want to connect more apps. So again, we go to Google Drive, New, More, Connect More Apps. And for the record, if you wanted your students to use this, they would have to go through these. This step would not need to be included, because once it gets approved, if it gets approved, then that is something that would be pushed from our end. But you have to go through this process to get it. So I'm going to look for Kami. I found Kami. I'm going to click on it. The only option that you guys would have would be to install. So you're going to click Install. You're going to give it permissions to basically see, create, edit, download, add, basically do everything that you could do to your Google Drive and everything you could do to your Google Classroom. It likes lots of permissions. Okay. I do not want to make that my default app. So I'm going to go back to my original that was submitted. And now when I look at the open with, because I'm looking at this in my Google Drive, I have an option to annotate with Kami. All right, so here we have Kami. Here's our PDF. As you can see, I did some poor math here. Was not trying to get the right answer. I was just writing numbers here. I did this last night on my laptop, and that is with a trackpad. So you can see the quality of numbers that may be generated from a trackpad. I'm going to try now with my mouse. I'll try to write the same number. That looks a lot better, still not perfect, and that took a lot more effort than I wanted it to, than typing 562 would take. But that allows us to annotate on top of this. It actually allows us to write directly on top of a PDF, which if that's your goal, that could be a solution for you. I would hope that you maybe would choose one of the other options, but that is totally to you. To get this now into, like, let's say Google Classroom, to be able to turn it in, we now have to hit Share Document. Make sure that anybody in your domain can view it. We copy that link. And now with this link copied, we can turn it into Google Classroom like we would turn anything else in. Now, what I'm going to do is not turn it in because I'm not a student on any of these courses. What I am going to do is just make an announcement. Your students would do the same thing. They would click Add. They would do Link. and then they would paste that link in.
We have a question.
Mhm.
Amber would like to know, if we did this in the spring through Canvas, do we need to go through it again in Canvas?
Amber, I'm going to need a little bit more details on that question. What do you mean by this?
Setting up the Cami.
If you set up Cami for yourself, you should not have to do it again. That should be on your Canvas account, correct? That more than likely it will be good. The only thing that you would have to do potentially is give it permission again to Google Drive. It may have lost that connection.
And if you're using it with students?
Yeah, and if you're using with students, when the new students come into your class, they're going to most likely need to get those permissions again. Just establishing that connection. Every so often it will disconnect to make sure that you're still actively using it and you still want it to have those permissions. Great. Any other questions on this math example before we move on? All right. Our next example or sample that was submitted to us was digitizing this document. Now, disclaimer, when you're getting documents from some of your programs that you've purchased, like Reading A to Z or so on and so forth, you'll want to make sure that you have the appropriate distribution licenses to use that online versus in person, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my disclaimer. Okay. So with this, I saw this a couple different ways. The first one that I did was a Google Doc. So with this Google Doc, I was trying to keep it as similar as possible to the original. If I split my screen, Kathy, is that? Can you see both of those all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So if we're looking at these two, I wanted to keep them as similar as I could to the original. So we basically just put the instructions at the top. If you're using Google Classroom, you don't need a name on here. So hopefully you're using Google Classroom or Canvas. If not, go watch a Google Classroom video that we have posted. It'll change your life. So we got our headers up here: energy from food, energy from gasoline, the main idea, detail 1, 2. The only reason I did two different examples here, this is just a table that I've inserted. I don't like having my students input responses right next to the directions or the text. Because oftentimes what will happen is this gets deleted and they're like, oh, I didn't know anything was supposed to go there. Or what was supposed to go there again? I don't remember. So that's why I like to break up their response into a different column. All these are our tables, so we can just insert table, and that's a 2 by 4. Looks like that, and we can just type in the same information here. And that's how I produce that. One other step you could take is you could actually insert a row above, and you could say, questions, and then, well, I guess that works better for the next one, not that one, because questions and answers are in the same column here. So what I was going to say is on this one, if you insert a row above, you could do question and then answer or response. That way the students know this is the question column and this is where you put your answer. I think that one's a pretty standard one. Please let me know if you got any questions on that. The other solution that I came up with was, again, a Google Doc or a Google Form. So again, I put the instructions on the first section, write the main idea for each of the 4 sections in the box below the section heading, then write 2 details from each section in the larger boxes beneath that. I guess I should probably modify those directions because they're not technically larger boxes. But we have our main idea, answer, first detail, second detail.
We have a question.
What is our question?
Michelle wants to know, so to digitize PDFs, we have to recreate it in a Google Doc?
Well, Michelle, it depends on what you want to do with that PDF. Are you trying to get information back from students? What's your goal with the PDF? If you're trying to collect data back from students, you really need to really determine their input method and what might cause the least amount of pain and suffering from both explaining how to use that input method and how to get for the students to write things down.
She says, yes, my goal would be to collect data back from students.
Okay, so if your goal is to collect data back from students, then my suggestion as far as the easiest thing to do would be putting in a Google Doc or a Google form. They could also take a picture of things they've written down. So like if you put a PDF on your learning management system and they responded with number 1 on a piece of paper, number 2 on a piece of paper, they could take a picture and insert it.
She could take a picture, put it in a Google slide, and then make it her master, which would be the background, and then put text boxes where the students need to answer.
Right. So then I'm not sure how well you guys can hear Kathy or not. The other option that she said was kind of like my first one, where you took a screenshot of your document and then put it in a Google slide and then allowed your students via text box to write on top of it. That would be another option for you as well.
All excellent suggestions. Thank you.
But the long answer is more than likely on a PDF, the best route is going to be to convert it into something else. That way it's easier for your students and it's less troubleshooting for you. Now, if we look at this Google form, so this one, we just have the one section, energy from food, main idea, detail 1, detail 2. Now, the great thing about this is since this question is very, very similar, all of these questions are very similar. If I come down here and create a new section by clicking on the equal sign, and I change this one to energy from, I think it was gasoline. Now all I have to do, click on this question, I can hit duplicate. Click on this question, I can hit duplicate and duplicate. So now I have double questions. I can just click and drag this down. Click and drag this down, and click and drag this down. And now we already have 2 of those questions finished. So next, main idea is that. Here's my detail, and then here we go. So the more that you convert things into digital resources with digital inputs, the faster it will go. The more comfortable you become with the tools, the faster it will go as well. I know it might seem a little overwhelming, and not everything needs to be necessarily a digital something at this point, but these are just some options for you.
Question. Kelly would like to know, do you have to put it into slides to add the text boxes for answers? Can you add text boxes to a scanned worksheet?
So Kelly, would you just be adding the PDF directly to like Google Classroom or Canvas?
Yes.
So if you're just adding it directly to Classroom or Canvas, that's not going to be an editable PDF. It's not going to be something that students can write on top of. You would have to first put it onto something else that they could write on top of it for, like a Google slide or something like that. Can you do it in Google Docs or just slides as well? As far as inserting images and text boxes on top, Google Slides is going to be your go-to. In Google Slides, you have text boxes and images where you can layer objects very easily. That is why Google Slides is much more superior to Google Docs with doing this type of thing. When I mean layering, what I'm talking about is we can literally put a shape down. I did a text box, didn't I?
Yes.
Sorry. We can insert a shape, and then we could insert a shape on top of that, and then we could insert a shape on top of that, and then we could put a text box if we wanted to. And then we can rearrange how all of those things live together. So we can change if this one's on top, if this one's on bottom. I can take this very large rectangle and I can move it to the front. And it's now going to cover everything else. Imagine you physically had these 4 different objects in your hands. You can layer them and really organize how they're working. So if we imagine that this big rectangle is whatever you want the students to see, whether it's an image of a worksheet, pictures of something, and you want them to write on top of it, you're going to want to put it in the back. And then anything else that you're going to want them to write on it, to put on it, any text boxes or whatever can go on top of that. In Google Docs, that's not going to happen. You're not able to do that and fluidly move these things around on top of it. So I hope that answered your question, Gwen. All right, the next thing that was submitted to us is this. We had this document sent to us asking for suggestions on how to kind of digitize this. And again, we're expecting our students to write something on this and return it to us. We can't expect them to have a printer and be able to print it out and scan it. We could use Kami if we wanted to have them write on top of the PDF, if that's our goal. I like to convert things into Google Docs. I like to convert things into forms and make it easier for my students to input it. I would rather put in the work on my end to convert it. So here is a Google Doc that I created. I tried to match. Come on now. I tried to match the original and its theme the best I could. So at the top of theirs, they've got these place values. So I put mine at the top as well. That is a table. So I just inserted a table. And I did a 7 by 2. And then I just put in all the text. To change the colors, I just highlighted it and changed the fill color, something else, just to break it up. She asked to have these like 10s is. Again, like I talked about in the last data table where students are putting questions and answers, I like to differentiate between these are the questions, here's your answers. And the students can just type in these fields to put in their answers. All of these are fairly similar in regards to questions we've already gone over and things that we've looked at. So I wanted to look at this one, an area problem, 7 feet by 2 feet, a car is parked in a parking spot that is 7 feet long by 2 feet wide. How many square feet is the parking space? Draw the area in the rectangle. So many times when we're teaching how to do this, we break this up into 2, and then we break this up into 7, and then we can count that that's 14. So here what we did is we took this information and we drew it and put it into our data table. So I'll go ahead and show you our process here. Insert, I just did a 1 by 2. And I labeled this one question 1. And then here's the interesting thing that we can do in a Google Doc. Gwen, this might go back to your question a little bit as well. This might work for you. If we go to insert, we can actually insert a Google drawing directly into our Google Doc. So this would allow me to have like a Canvas workspace, and it will basically insert it as an image. So I can put in my rectangle here. I can put in a text box here, and I can say this is 7 feet. I can put in a text box here and say that this is 2 feet. I can put in a text box below and put my entire question. A car is blah, blah, blah. And then when I save and close this, it will all completely fill in this cell. And if I click on it, you'll see that it's actually all one object. I can't edit any of these fields. I can't resize that. I can resize the entire thing and it will make it bigger or it will make it smaller. But if I wanted to edit these things again, I would have to double click it, and that would bring me back into my canvas to where I can then fix things that might have had a mistake on them. Maybe I didn't want a border around the square rectangle object. And then that would allow me to go back into there and I can say, here is your answer. So that would be one option for digitizing that scenario. This is another one. And I kind of alluded to this earlier about how you can make some manipulatives. We're used to manipulatives, students being able to move things around, kind of touch and feel. Well, we have to rethink what that means in a digital world. We can't go to a student's house and hand them a bunch of stuff, in some cases, depending if they're doing virtual or not, objects, and have them play with them, touch them, and move them. So we have to think, how can we do that in a virtual way? So over here, I've created a Google slide deck with the same question. 7 feet by 2 feet, a car is parked, and then what is the total area? Don't forget your units. Like I did on my last slide that I showed you guys, they can't move any of this. It's part of my master. So if I go to View, Master, we can see here all of this is in the background. Now that I'm in the master, I can move on, I can click it, I can edit it, I can change it, I can do all of those things. So this is all part of the background. None of my students can touch any of this. They can't modify any of this. The only thing they can modify are these little squares. So what they can do, this teacher asked them to go ahead and divide this up to help them find the area. So they can click and we can drag our squares over here to actually fill in the area of this rectangle. And then our students can come back and physically count how many squares is this rectangle. And then they can calculate the square feet by just counting, right? This is step one of learning area, is being able to do this and count them. And here is a digital way that we can have our students do this. Not only is this a digital way that students can do this, this is a digital way they can do it and then show their work to us. They could turn in the slide deck and we could see that their answer is 14 square feet. And we can see how they got to that. Now, if they had that it was 16 square feet and they got all of their squares stacked on top of each other to make them fit, we could come in here and see that. And we could discuss with them about how they should not be overlapping. Now, the way I was able to make this work is I made these 1 by 1 and 7 by 2 shapes. So to do that, you right click on the shape, you go to Format Options, Size and Rotation, and your width and height, I made them 1 inch by 1 inch. So you just have to change the scale depending on your object. So it's feet, I put it in inches. That's not going to change anything as far as the student's perspective. And I did the same thing with the big rectangle on the master slide. I right clicked, went to Format Options, and changed it to 7 by 2. So that's another way to have that manipulative, so the students can use it, so the students can engage with the digital work that they're doing and really be able to show their understanding and not just type in an answer per se. The way I got all of these to magically continue to come out, there is a finite number there. All I did was make one of them. And then I hit Control-C to copy it, and I hit Control-V a bunch. And then I highlighted all of those at one time. I right-clicked, and I said, let's go ahead and align those to the center. And let's go ahead and align those vertically to the middle. And now we have this infinite appearing stack of squares. And the rest of this is just in the master slide. Any questions at this point?
Not yet.
Okay. So those were the 3 different documents that were submitted to us and asked us to help them figure out ways to digitize them. And that's how we did, or what we came up with. After I answer this next question, I do have some other digital resources that I'm going to kind of just show you so you can see some of the different possibilities with some of these tools. We're not going to walk through the creation of those today. I'm just going to kind of show those to you just so you can see them. And then, you know, if you have any questions at the end, we'd be more than happy to answer those as well.
Michelle does have a question. For those of us using Canvas instead of Google Classroom, what is the best way for students to submit these Google Docs / slides in Canvas to be graded?
The best way to, Kathy, you can correct me after I say my best way in a second, because you deal with Canvas more. I haven't used it in a year or so. But the best way I would do it is after they get their version. So at the top here, we've got this suffix that says edit. So when you're the teacher and you're submitting it and giving it to the students, the first thing I would suggest doing is changing that to copy. So this would be before your students worked on it. After you made it, you would distribute this link to your students. Copy at the end instead of edit. They would then open it. It would make them make a copy of it. So not everybody's working on the same thing. Now this is already finished, right? The students have done their work. They have their answer. They can, 2 ways. They can either just copy this URL at the top and turn that in as an assignment in the link field on Canvas. Or you can have them share it with you. That does seem like it might be a lot more. Actually, this link at the top, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for you. What you need them to do is share and then copy this link. This is the link they need to turn into you. Anyone in Boone County can open this link. That's what we want them to be able to copy and share with you. Otherwise, if they just send you this one, you would not be able to see it. So share, copy link, turn that into Canvas via the link feature on the assignment.
Okay, you could accomplish it that way, but Canvas also has an external tool, and this is something that I'm going to be covering in the next session this morning. And it's a cloud assignment external tool where I can actually create an assignment based on a Google Doc, Google Slide, wherever my assignment is. And when I create it with the external tool, what that does is when the students open that assignment, it will create a copy of that document slide into their drive. The students will then edit and submit right there on the assignment. So that is a much cleaner, quicker way, and it's done through the external tool assignment.
Like most things, there are many, many different ways to accomplish these tasks. And it really boils down to your preference and what you know your students' abilities are and what they're able to do within these tools. And a lot of the Google tools do lend themselves to being a little bit more user-friendly within the Google Classroom, Google Suite for Education. All of that working together is a little bit more fluid. All right, so I'm going to show you some other examples of things that we can do, some other manipulatives and things that we could do for our students. So we're going to look at this one. For elementary math people, I know math is a very hard one that we struggle with for doing digitally. We can make some 10 frames the same way in the Google slide with the master slide. So the stuff is in the back. It's asking us to represent this number. So over here, we've got some space objects, and we can just move them over, and we can represent 7. And these 10 frames are things that students are familiar with, comfortable with, and they can go ahead and fill in 7 or a big block of 7. You can also, or 5, I'm sorry. You can also do chunks of 5 to make it easier or faster for them, just like they would see in like Dreambox and things like that. So that would be another type of manipulative that you can see your students work in. Here's another one. This is from a gentleman called Reed Tech. And what you're seeing on the screen here is algebra tiles using Google Slides. So this is actually this is actually a Google slide. The only thing that the students can edit are these squares and rectangles. All of the other information is on that master slide. So the students can't move these brackets. They can't move, the toolbox. They can't use the -x squared. All they can do is type in their answers and fill in the answers at the bottom. That's the only thing they can edit, the only thing they can manipulate. And they can use these as manipulatives to help them solve this algebraic equation like they would in class. And the best part is you can then see their work. Let's see. We also have this example, plant parts, where we can create some either fillable plant parts over the flower name. So we found a labeled flower with all of the appropriate places. And then we can fill the blanks and then create text boxes on top. If you did not do this within the master slide, the students would be able to move these text boxes or these shapes off of the labels, and they would just be able to see the label. But by doing a master slide and putting the flower in the background and putting that square to cover the label, then the students can't remove them, and you don't have to spend 20 minutes cropping out all of those labels. Another option, same idea, you're going to want to get that master with the labels covered. But then, instead of having them type them in, you could do more of a drag and drop. Here's the option. Let's drag and drop it here. Okay, that's that. That's that. That's that. I am not actively trying to do this for all those people that know I taught science. I'm not actually reading, so don't. I think I saw Chris Kidd in here, so Chris, don't yell at me. I'm just moving things around. Okay. So that is another option to make things more interactive and engaging for students when they're not necessarily in front of you. Another option, which is a great option to make some of these things digitized, is choice boards. Choice boards are great for allowing students to have some options in their learning, and we can use Google Slides actually to make an interactive hyperlinked choice board. Let me pull that up really quickly. My link for that is dead, so let me find the. Kathy, are you able to, can you find the link for that interactive choice board?
Okay, the one that I shared with you?
Yes.
Okay.
It was the Shake Up Learning one, I think. But the link I have is not working. So we'll be back to that in just a second. If not, I can pull up one of mine that I've made.
Is it the tic-tac-toe?
Yes. Another thing we can do for math is like a coordinate plane. If you want your students to be able to plot points, we could put the coordinate plane in the master in the background, and then we can have a movable dot, but we can say plot, 3,1, and we can see if they can plot that. You could have, multiple dots. You could have lines over here. You could have different things that they would be able to move around and manipulate. Depending on the age of your students, you could also have them just put the line in themselves on top of here, right? They can then graph that, and we can make that thicker, change the color, whatever we might want to do.
Send that link to you in Teams. Are you doing Teams open?
I can. Yeah. Thank you. So like I didn't get it, Teams.
There, you got it.
So as I was saying, you can use it also for a choice board with hyperlinks. You can link within a slide to other portions of the slide. So if we wanted them to start with number 5, so this is the one we really want them to do, and then we could just put other options around of other things that are maybe equivalent or similar to each other. We could They have to obviously make 3 in a row to make tic-tac-toe. But when we click here, it switches us down to activity, or slide 7, activity number 5. So they can come all the way down here and see the directions for that one, and then they can go back to the top with this hyperlink, and they can bounce all around. So this is just another example of how to use Google Slides for something other than just notes or a traditional presentation tool. All right, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, so I apologize for that. But we are limited on our amount of time that we have with you guys.
How do you add the link in a slide?
So how do we add a link in a slide?
Hyperlink.
Hyperlink.
Insert menu.
So we're going to first put our text in. So I'm going to say, go to last slide, whatever it may be. And then we're going to go to our little insert link here. It's a little chain link. Or you can go to insert link. Or alternatively, you can hit Control K. And then you're going to say, I want to go somewhere in this slides presentation. Or you can paste an external link. And then you can say you want to go to last slide, which is what I said. So that's going to be slide 11. And then apply. And now when the students are in that, it will have a little pointer on it, and they will go to the last slide. If you still in your mind have something that you would like to see how Kathy and or myself would work in trying to digitize it, please scroll back up in the chat and fill out that survey for digitizing. We would love to highlight something that you submitted to us and kind of work through it and give you our perspective on it and what we would potentially do with it. And just because Kathy and I suggested it may not be the best suited option for you. You're going to have to find what works best for you in this digital world here. But me and Kathy are here to answer any and all questions that you may have along your journey. And if I can find it, here we go. Our last thing for you today, me and Kathy will be in the chat for about another 5 minutes or so to answer any additional questions you may have. But here is a link to our survey, which will provide you a certificate of attendance for today. Please feel free to fill that out. We really appreciate your time today. And again, we'll be here for about another 4 or 5 minutes. If you have any additional questions for us, we'd be more than happy to help answer those as you move forward.